Hi. So it is cold and snowy outside today, so I thought today we would do something that is kind of one of those relaxing activities. I actually love doing this. It's great. You put on a movie or an audiobook and away you go. I'm gonna make these gift tags. They're super simple. They are a great way to put names and, the to from things on your gifts, and they're recyclable or compostable. And that of course depends on the kind of wrapping paper you use, but they're also reusable. And I like those cute little stickers that you put on packages. I think they're great. But the problem with those cute little stickers is that stickers sometimes make wrapping paper unrecyclable, and that is a problem. Then it's one other thing to buy. And these just use up scraps of wrapping paper that are too small to wrap a gift with. So that's part of why I love them, and they coordinate with whatever wrapping paper you've purchased. So I will tell you what I do is I have this bin right here of wrapping paper scraps. And these are those small pieces of wrapping paper that might be good for wrapping a tiny gift like this, but they also are great for making tags. So I just collect this for a couple of months or even longer, and then I'll decide one night I'm gonna sit down and make some tags. And I make tags and I keep them with all of my wrapping stuff in a little box. And then I have tags available all the time. And it's never a big rush in the end. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna make some easy gift tags. I'll show you everything that you need to do. It's a really simple kind of meditative process, and we'll just make a couple tags together. Before we get started, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel. I have tons of gardening content. That's my big thing, but also DIY projects and crafts like this. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so this project requires just a few really simple materials and then a little bit of time. And this is pretty mindless once you get the hang of it. It's a really easy project, so put on a movie and sit back and relax. Okay, so here's what you need. You'll need some cardstock. You're going to need some scraps of wrapping paper. You're going to need some glue, and I like to use a glue stick. You could use a spray glue if you wanted to also, but I really like to use a glue stick for this project. Then you're going to need some skinny ribbon at the end for finishing, and a pair of scissors is really helpful. I like to work on a mat or something to protect my tabletop since we are using glue. And then I have a variety of punches. This one will cut circles, and it's helpful, but they're really, and they're adjustable. So like you can make big circles or small circles. But the size that I really love to use is this tag punch. So this will cut tags in 3 different sizes. It's actually all the same punch. And I like it because you can see what's happening in the back. I also have a corner rounder, and this is also helpful, and I think it just makes the tags, so you use it at the bottom and kind of round off those corners. I just feel like that makes the tags look a little bit more finished. I'll drop links to all of these products down in the description below so that you can see what I use. But these are really inexpensive. They'll last you forever. And in the end, it's a lot cheaper than buying a bunch of tags. So, all right, let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is glue a bunch of scraps of paper, wrapping paper, to your cardstock. And like this one is actually pretty big. I could probably use that for something else, but I have this one, for example, that's not. And this is probably good for this. And here we've got some paper that I could use for birthdays, so that's a good one. Oh, and this paper here, which is a weird size, and there's probably not enough left. So we'll start with those. So I'm just going to take my glue. I mean, this is very, very basic, but I'm just going to glue the paper to the cardstock. And I'm going to line up, since I have a straight edge on this piece of paper, I'm going to line it up with the edge of the cardstock and make sure I have smushed that down, just like that. This does not have to be perfect by any stretch. And you can see, like, my wrapping paper is a little crinkled. It doesn't matter because we're going to flatten all of this out while it dries. And when you're gluing, you're rehydrating the paper slightly, and that can help to get some of the wrinkles out too. So put this down just like this. This is super narrow. So you can see this one's really long, and I'll just cut that off, but we'll have a strip here. And you could do this very deliberately, like if you have, I don't know, 5 or 6 different types of wrapping paper, you could just cut a strip off of each of those types and start there so that you have things that match, or maybe you like to mix and match. I'm actually more of a mix and match kind of person when I'm wrapping gifts. One thing you want to make sure though is that you have glue everywhere on that wrapping paper, because when you go to punch it, you really want the wrapping paper glued down to the cardstock pretty well. So like this little corner keeps popping up, so I'm gonna glue that down. And you can have them touching, you could even have them overlapping if you want, but there's no real reason to do that. This is slightly over here because it's irregular, but I'll just snip this off. And then I think I'm going to use this to cover this other edge. So see here, I can just do that, cut that off, and then put the other section down here. There. Again, these edges don't have to be perfect at this point. You will come back and trim all of that later. Okay. So you can see the paper's getting kind of wrinkly because when you are putting glue on here, it's rehydrating the fibers of the paper. So here's a trick. Stick the sheet you're working on under the mat that you're working on, and then just go on and make another sheet. Or if you don't have a mat that you're working on, stick it under a heavy book and let it dry that way. And I usually do this, like I'll do this the day before I'm going to make all the tags, because you do want that glue to be really dry. If you're doing it with wet glue, then you get glue all over your punches and all that kind of stuff. So be sure that you're letting it dry. I love this wrapping paper. I think this is so pretty. And it's a really nice recycled wrapping paper. I got it, gosh, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at the Container Store, and I wish I had more of it because it's so pretty. And if I remember correctly, it's made from recycled paper, all that kind of stuff. If you're like me and you're concerned about wrapping paper and its ecological impact, which is a legit concern, but I also I have a thing for beautiful paper. I love it, and I love wrapping gifts. So there are a couple of things to keep in mind when you're buying wrapping paper. First of all, look for wrapping paper that is recycled. And then avoid wrapping paper that's super shiny. And I didn't know that when I bought this paper long ago. But see how this has glitter on it. So anything with glitter, anything that has metallic paints on it, and anything that's really shiny, those papers are not recyclable. And even if you put some of that paper in with paper that is recyclable, you run the risk of having the entire batch thrown out, because as they're sorting, if they see something that's not recyclable, they're likely to throw the entire batch out, as opposed to running the risk of having something contaminate an entire batch of recycling. So this is also true with gift cards, this is also true with greeting cards. So when you're buying things, avoid wrapping paper like this that has shiny stuff on it, that's sparkly, that's flocked, and has texture. Any of those kinds of things are not recyclable paper. But the rest of it is. So once your paper is dry, and you can do this just with scissors freehand, you can use a straight edge, you can use a cutting thing like this. But once your paper is dry, you're going to want to cut it into strips. And I find it easier to cut them kind of short ways. And the first thing I do is just cut kind of to neaten up the sections of wrapping paper, because I have kind of crooked lines and that kind of thing. And yes, absolutely, you could have done this first and trimmed all of that up nicely, but I find that honestly it works just as well this way. So I'm going to go through and cut these apart and make them just into strips, so it's just one type of wrapping paper. And then I'll probably come along here, we'll trim that edge right here. Just trim that off. And of course, the whole purpose of this project is not to waste scraps of paper. You want to find a use for them instead of tossing them. Wrapping paper is not cheap, you know? So making this into something that is really usable is helpful. So I'm just going to trim that. I like this little cutter. It works really well. If you have a better paper cutter, it's not perfect by any stretch. I wish this little indentation was deeper. I feel like it doesn't hold paper as well as I want it to. But I get a pretty straight line most of the time. Straighter than I would if I was freehanding with scissors. So that works well. All right, so I've trimmed that off. Good here. Yep, everything's looking good. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with my scissors. And this I'm just going to freehand, but I'm going to snip this little section off. I'm going to trim that little corner off there. Does not matter if that's perfectly straight, because at the end you can tidy that up further. But these are pieces that are somewhat consumable. And because I have this stamp, these are the measuring guides here. It's 1.5 inches, 2.5 inches, and 2 inches. That's what these measurements are. So you could go through and cut these into whatever width strip you want. I do not even get that scientific about it all, honestly, because all I'm going to do is stick this. So this is roughly 1.5 inches in here. That's fantastic. So I'm going to put this strip right in here, and I like using this upside down because I can actually see how it's lined up. So I put it in there. I look at, I think of these as like the shoulders of the tag. Is that largely in the center? And then I punch. So here I have the top of my tag. Now, I could cut this shorter and make 2 little tags out of this, but I think this one I'm going to make into a big tag. So I'm going to take my corner cutter and I'm just going to trim those corners, and it's done. Super duper easy. So again, with this one, get that roughly centered. Punch. And here I'm not quite centered, so I can come back with my scissors, or because I'm not great freehand, I can come back with this and trim that edge so it's more centered if that's going to bother you. If it's not going to bother you, then just leave it. Because I guarantee you, your gift recipient is not going to notice that. But now that's a little bit more even. And so again, I'm going to leave this one long because I don't feel like it's quite big enough to cut into 2. And there it is. Now, when you're using paper like this, so this is, I have choices here. I can make a big tag because it's wide enough to make a nice big tag. And maybe I'll make a couple of those so that the top is nice. And now I just decide how long do I want that to be. So I'll make it about here. And then again, I love this corner trimmer because it has 3 different, oops, that popped up there, radii for the corners. It has small, which is almost pointed but slightly rounded, medium, and then large, which is much more rounded. And I think the bigger tags look good with the large, and then the smaller tags I tend to use the others. So let's see, I'm going to cut this roughly in half and make 2 more tags out of this. I think those are a nice size. So just put it in here. Excuse the dog itching underneath my table. And you can even get as technical as like looking at the pattern on the paper. Maybe you have a pattern that is, that's a really cool pattern. And so you line things up, like for example, with this paper, it had stripes on it. So I tried to line the tags up so that I was getting some of these topiaries on each tag. And then with this paper, let's see. Oof, I can't even get one out of there. So this paper actually had tiny Christmas trees kind of scattered across the paper, but I was able to cut some tags that don't have to be Christmassy because all they are red and white gingham in the kind of field of the paper. So you can line things up and get kind of as fancy or as simple as you want to with your cutting. So here again, I'm going to use that large corner trimmer and trim it off here. And we have a nice tag. I love, 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 love this paper. Okay, so once you have made a bunch of tags, so I keep this in my drawer of wrapping things, and then I have them, and I have Christmas tags, and I have other kinds of wrapping paper that's more neutral for birthdays or, you know, any kind of gift that you end up giving. There's all kinds of stuff in here. But I also this year, I thought, why am I throwing these away or recycling them? I can reuse them too, because of course I give my husband gifts every year. And we give our family gifts every year. So I have this new basket that I'm going to put the gift tags we've already made in here. And you'll notice I use this thin satin ribbon. So even if you're not going to reuse the gift tags, you can always reuse this. You can just pull it out, recycle or compost the gift tag, and then reuse this ribbon year after year after year. Super, super simple. Once you've created a set of gift tags, you should be able to use them for many years, and they look so cute on a package. So when I've got a box, like I have this little gift right here, and I have some ribbon, and I'm just going to tie this up, and I'm going to put a big flouncy bow on it. Partly because I love the way a big bow looks on a little package. So again, this is ribbon that I bought years ago, and we just reuse it all the time. I have a little container. I almost never have to buy wrapping ribbon because I just save it year to year. If you don't buy the disposable ribbon, you buy stuff that's actually kind of a fabric ribbon. Of course, this is made out of polyester. But if you're using it year after year after year, and literally this will last for decades, then there's not the kind of ethical issue with using something that's made of plastic, because if you use it more than once, it's a better purpose for it, in my opinion. Okay, so I've just snipped off, this is maybe 6 inches of ribbon here. And for this package, I don't want this to be dangling too much. So I'm going to make a pretty short loop. But for a larger package, you might let it dangle a little more for effect. And I'm going to trim. Here's a trick with ribbon. If you cut ribbon at an angle, it is less likely to fray. And if you cut it in a, well, I'll show you in a minute. If you cut it with a V at the ends of the ribbons, it is almost never frays as a result of that. So that's a nice sewing trick. So I think I've put this on the wrong way. I want that to face up, the top, the patterned part to face up there. So you just tie this, then this is like a simple shoelace bow. This is nothing super fancy on here, but tie this and make a nice plump back bow. And you have that cute little tag dangling off of there. And then this ribbon, if you cut it at an angle, so you fold it in half like this, and then you cut at an angle with the edges up like that, that will not fray. And you know, this is woven ribbon, so it's not going to fray very much anyway, but this also, I think, just looks cute too. So my tags are all done, and I want to show you a little bit about the orientation of paper and how you use the paper that influences how the tags turn out. So you remember I had 5 different types of paper here that I was making tags from. And if you look, so for example, this has a small kind of overall pattern. So no matter what size the tag turned out to be, and there are kind of a wide range, some of them are fatter, some of them are skinnier, they all kind of look roughly the same. And I didn't work very hard to put the pattern in a particular place on the tag. It was all fine. So a small pattern is going to turn out differently than a larger scale pattern. So these are the pirate paper, and you see I have one tag with a leg on it. And this has part of a map. But this one has a money bag on it. And so like they turned out differently. And here, because I had a boat and I had the pirate, I made really big tags so that I could accommodate that. But this is a really large scale pattern with a lot of kind of blank space. Now, does it actually matter what your tag has on it? Probably not, especially in this case, you know, it's just labeling something. But it is something to consider when you think about which direction you cut your paper, and it's something to consider when you think about which paper you use in general. So take a look at this too. So for this stripy paper, and if you remember, it looks like this. Now, I laid it out across the paper and then I ended up cutting it across the stripes like this, which gives me tags that have lots of different colors on them. But if I had laid it out and cut this direction, I would have had monochromatic or maybe dichromatic tags. And so the way that you cut the paper will influence the end product that you get. And you'll see some of the kind of scrappier pieces are just one color. And then others are striped horizontally and they have multiple colors. Another place that I love to use these tags is on gift bags. So if you hang one using the little ribbon off of a gift bag, it makes the gift bag so much more reusable. So even like those Amazon bags, just tie it into the bow again and you can reuse those an infinite number of times. I also have a tutorial for making these little fabric envelopes, which are so great for wrapping gifts. The full tutorial for making these is up on my YouTube channel, and I'll drop the link below, but it's also clicked right here up in the corner. So I hope this was a helpful and it's a really easy project. It's great to do in front of a movie. It's a great project for kids. You can make them in all shapes and sizes depending on what punch you have. But like I said before, all of the links to the materials are down below. If you have questions or comments, drop them below. I'll be sure to answer them. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Happy gardening!